Trump visits Japan for the second time and also brought with him some insults for Joe Biden.
So Team Rising is back in the House. Roger Fisk worked for the Obama administration, previously served senior aide for communication and policy for Senator John Kerry. Holly Turner is a Republican strategist who spent a year working in the SBA under President Trump. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
So Roger, to you first, since you worked with Senator Kerry's a lot of experience on foreign policy, what did you make of the president's trip to Japan? We just had an expert on who said from a pomp and circumstance view, it was a successful trip. But on policy, there's still some unshaky ground on the trade front and on North Korea.
A lot of frosting, not a lot of cake. Good visuals. I think Abe's kind of becoming his Asian crutch in a lot of ways. When things get difficult, he seems to go to that kind of safe place because they seem to have kind of a personal rapport. It wasn't particularly ambitious. It didn't necessarily achieve anything except to demonstrate a breach between the president and the prime minister about their view of the North Korea situation. So I would say heavy on the symbolism, very, very light on any real achievement.
What do you think, Holly?
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see the president have such a good relationship with another ally and to build on that a little bit. And he's patient. I mean, the president is not, he said on North Korea, he's not in a hurry. He wants to take that a step at a time. And I think this was just another step along that very long process. But we're at least heading in the right direction, I think. So it was fun to watch, too.
Of course, previously, this president had said we could all sleep well at night.
It's done.
Because it was a done deal.
June of 2017,
so,
he said there is no threat.
I'd love to compare a number of ballistic missiles fired, long-range missiles fired under this presidency and the last presidency.
Well, that's the difficult part, right, Roger? I mean, yes, the summit, is the threat over? No, but there's not, in the previous year, in 2017, we saw missiles overflying Japan. I mean, under the Obama administration, the EC and all these places were basically a missile testing zone. You have missiles flying near 737s. This is very, very scary times. I don't think the American people really understand how close things were to a military conflict. So things at least seem to have toned down under President Trump. We have a few short-range missile tests, and I don't grant you that in Asia that's a big deal. I understand why the Japanese are afraid about that, but we're not talking about long-range ICBMs capable of hitting San Francisco.
He is the volunteer firefighter who also turns out to be the arsonist. He is the one who turned up the volume on a lot of this. He is the one who, if you remember the Fire and Fury series of months, where he was literally pouring gasoline on this situation and then somehow pivots and turns himself into the savior of the whole situation. He's isolating himself both domestically, actually internally within the White House amongst his own people, and internationally. And again, similar to the situations with Saudi Arabia and Russia, he views the public relations prism as superior to the actual results of the diplomatic actions or lack thereof. Meaning, he does not want to hear from anyone that there were any kind of missile tests at all, because that starts to counter the narrative that he has imposed on himself, as he does with many other narratives. And just as he doesn't want to talk about election security and he wants to sidestep Congress to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, and doesn't want to hear anything about any of those three situations because it punctures the unreality, the cartoonish unreality that he builds around himself on a daily basis.
And Holly, at the same time, another not so great headline out of this trip was the president essentially siding with Kim Jong-un in his attacks on Joe Biden. Let's take a listen to a little bit of that.
Kim Jong-un made a statement that Joe Biden is a low IQ individual. He probably is, based on his record. I think I agree with him on that. But at the same time, my people think it could have been a violation, as you know. I view it differently. I view it as a man, perhaps he wants to get attention, and perhaps not. Who knows? It doesn't matter. All I know is that there have been no nuclear tests.
I mean, come on, what does it say to have the American president siding with Kim Jong-un over an American citizen?
I mean, I know precedent in the past has said that if we have a beef with somebody, we have to disagree with absolutely, whatever they say, we have to take the opposite, position. But what good does that do? I mean, why he's trying to mend a very long and painful, bad relationship with North Korea, why not side with him on this? I mean, the president has said that himself in the past. Yeah, okay, maybe it's not presidential, maybe it's not, you know, the most prestigious thing for the president of the United States to say, but what has that gotten us in the past? It's gotten us.
I mean, would you let your kids call someone a low IQ individual? I know I wouldn't, and I bet you wouldn't either.
Yeah, but nobody elected Trump. Nobody elected Trump for his
playground.
But
This
that's,
is
I think the point is that nobody expects differently from Trump. Like, did we really expect anything
That's
different?
not like a positive statement.
No, but I'm saying
so
people,
sad.
people went in this
There's
with
one thing
with eyes
celebrating
open.
here, which is at least he applied the term low IQ to a white person, because normally that's been his go-to to
no, that's not
denigrate
fair. I'm not
to
gonna
denigrate
take
Don
that.
Lemon, to
No.
denigrate Maxine Waters, on and on.
I will say, and you're right,
I'm
the
not-
thing is, he says it about everybody.
He says
let's
it
be
about
honest,
everyone.
it's not racial.
You can't just pick out
there-
a
yeah.
couple of instances. and say that
I'm with you, Ollie.
I just
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
and I stand by
Yes,
it.
and
But
some,
he says
yes,
it to
some of them
everyone.
happen to be African American.
He's
A
an
lot of
That's
them also
lovely.
happen to be
He's
white.
But the
equal
response that
opportunity
the
offender.
defense is that he says it about everyone, which I don't even agree with. But that's the idea that that's your defense. This daily projectile vomiting of insult and conspiracy and fear mongering is disgusting, and it's so sad. One of the ironies of life is I find myself recently in the last few months advocating for a more robust GOP, because look at me, here I am. I worked for Barack Obama's both campaigns, inaugurations, administrations, and one day this will be over. And one day you're going to be standing there saying fiscal discipline gone, $1.5 trillion borrowed, family values, obviously, I mean, that's not even worth talking about, patriotism, taking the sides of a dictator who fed his uncle to dogs, and somehow that's the person that the president wants to align himself with. This is stunning. And at the end of all this, you guys are going to be standing holding an empty sack because you will have given away every single pillar of your brand to this cult. And he's not even a Republican. I don't understand
But
it.
President Obama attacked Donald Trump when Trump was running in 2016 while on his own foreign trips. I'm just saying, yes, is the rhetoric
He
different?
didn't attack
but the
President,
substance
he
of it is
didn't
much
attack
the
Trump.
same.
The idea that President Trump insulted Americans by name in the same manner that this president does is ridiculous. President Obama went up to the GOP House retreat and met with the doors closed for 4 hours when he became president to talk about his agenda. No notes, no teleprompter, no press. That's spine. That's knowing what you're talking about. Doing anger and insult and conspiracy, anyone can do it. A seventh grader can
Holly,
do it.
I want to let you respond to what Roger said about the party and the future of the party.
I mean, the party's great. There are economic reports coming out just last night that Trump is on track to win again. So, you know, maybe in Roger's bubble here in D.C., you know, this can't happen again. The president can't get reelected because,
What about
you know,
this
he's
idea
offensive.
that fiscal conservatism
Well,
is
it's
out the
an
window?
antiquated view of what the party
the
is.
moral values out the window.
By the way, if Democrats can say the same thing when they're in office, that they're worried about fiscal responsibility, then we're going to be on good track.
We're
as
not
Americans.
supposed to be the
But
party
y'all-
of fiscal
I know,
responsibility, but we have
That's
been.
what I'm just saying. It's never ever been an
President
issue, and
Clinton
now all
balanced
of a
budgets
sudden,
while he was being impeached, and this president says that he can't even cross the street while he's being
There's no
investigated.
wars
It's
going on in
pathetic.
1990.
All right, so
yeah.
more on this president. Roger, let me go back to you on this. We had more attacks, pretty hypocritical attacks, on Joe Biden via the Twitter. He said, which one do we start with? Super
First one.
Predator?
Yeah,
All
anyone
right, Super
associated.
Predator was
Yeah.
the term associated with the 1994 crime bill that Sleepy Joe Biden was so heavily involved in passing. That was a dark period in American history, but has Sleepy Joe apologized? No. Of course, talking about the 94 crime bill, which, Roger, I have a lot of issues with, and Biden has also admitted was problematic. However, for this president to criticize Biden on this crime bill, given his rise to prominence over what he did with the Central Park Five, is pretty incredible.
He, to this day, still says that they're guilty, and he pulled out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the death penalty for a bunch of young kids who have since been exonerated by science. The decades of actions, and I will try to tone down, the decade of actions that have clear race implications, the housing investigation in the 70s, the Central Park Five in the 80s, no one can deny the racial undertones of the birther movement. And to have him come around and say this is just ridiculous.
Imperfect messenger, but this is a fight that has to happen in the party. Right? Joe Biden maintains his support for the 1994 crime bill as recently of a couple of weeks ago. Is this not a problem within the Democratic electorate? Take Trump out of it. If Joe Biden becomes if Joe Biden becomes the nominee within this party, it's not problematic. I mean,
I don't think so.
Bill
You guys
Clinton,
are the law and order folks.
Well,
I mean,
Bill Clinton said himself it was a problem. Bill Clinton in 2015 said that that the 1994 crime bill made the problem.
I mean,
worse.
this is the architecture of mass incarceration.
Yeah.
It destroyed families. And there were Republicans that supported it, but it was a Democrat-led initiative. And I mean,
there was a bipartisan lock 'em up consensus.
There were.
At this
There
point.
absolutely
Joe
were.
Biden was
There
leading
were.
the charge.
There were. And to Trump's credit, I mean, this has been something that has been on his radar for a while now, and he is actively trying to take steps to.
I mean, past criminal justice reform. I mean, look, criminal justice reform has many of its own issues.
And I know, internally there are discussions about doing large-scale pardons to release people or to exonerate them based on that were. I mean, it's just the injustice of that bill.
Right.
They are trying to fix that. The problem is that all of those are under the Department of Justice. They're trying to move that under the White House right now so that they can get that done. But that's
Roger,
the problem.
on the Democratic politics piece, do you think people care? I mean, this was an integral part of the infrastructure of mass incarceration. We're talking about the sentencing disparity between crack and cocaine, 3 strikes. I mean, all of that. It was a very damaging bill that has in part led to skyrocketing rates of incarceration. And Biden really hasn't grappled with that. He likes to tout the good things that were in it. He likes to tout that the violence against women.
As anyone does in legislation.
Of course, but do you think that he needs to demonstrate more of an understanding of the problems and the damage that bill did, or do you think people don't really care, just on the politics?
Well, I think introspection and reflection is good on all these things, especially when you have a couple decades of data to go back on. If you think of this was done right after the Republican Revolution of 1994. So this is a Gingrich-Clinton vehicle. It's the beginning of their kind of very odd functional/dysfunctional partnership that they had that also led to welfare reform, which at the time was actually much more controversial, if you remember.
Yep.
To look at this through a political lens, I would say that the trend of Democratic candidates that are tripping over themselves to apologize for things needs to be looked at. And if I were maybe not giving advice to the former vice president, but at least a couple of them, I wouldn't necessarily be looking to pile onto that apology kind of like, I haven't gotten it right until I started running for president kind of narrative. I think there will be some kind of reward for people that stand up and say, I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. We know more now. We should revisit it, just as we do every major piece of legislation in a generational context, just as on the good things, just as we should go back and revisit the Americans with Disabilities Act and update that and modernize it for like the online age and things like that. Politically, I don't think that the rush to apologize over these things is necessarily smart. I understand the trend of it. I don't know if that's what the vice president is thinking, but I think what he wants to do is in the larger fabric of his Senate votes, either you start down this road of revisiting these things and apologizing for, or you don't.
Right.
And I think he's looking at this saying like, I was in the Senate for 35 years. Like that's going to be a long series of conversations.
He wants to run on I was Obama's vice president.
Yeah.
He doesn't really want to run on the Senate track record because there's a lot more there that would be challenging in today's day and age. Holly and Roger, great combo.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, the president traded out the WWE for a little bit of sumo wrestling.
And a dedication to honoring America's heroes that can weather any storm. We'll explain right before we go.